This morning on BRN, the real retirement crisis. Joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Andrew Biggs of the American Enterprise Institute, and he's also the author of the upcoming book, The Real Retirement Crisis. Andrew, always great to see you. Thanks for joining us on the program this morning.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you again for having me.
And you've got such a varied background, but you cover so many different parts of the retirement landscape. I want to ask you, what do we get wrong? I guess my first question is, what do we get wrong about the retirement crisis?
hmm Well, I mean, we could talk for a long time on that. I've sort of made almost a career the past 10, 15 years of talking about the things we get wrong. About the retirement system, how well Americans are preparing for retirement. The biggest thing I think people get wrong is the idea that we're less well prepared for retirement today than we were in the past. About 5 years ago, the Wall Street Journal ran this article says Americans entering retirement less prepared than ever. And that article won some journalism award. And when you actually look at the data it relied on, the numbers were completely wrong. The reality is, if you think about the things that, say, a financial planner would tell Americans to do for retirement, we're already doing them. Things like have more coverage retirement plans in the workplace, more people enrolling in their retirement plans, contributing more to our retirement plans, working more later in life, labor force participation at older ages, delaying Social Security claiming. Those are all things people say, oh, to avoid this retirement crisis, you should do these things. We have been doing all of those things literally for the last 50 years. Retirement savings have never been higher. Participation has never been higher. Contributions to retirement plans have never been higher. So it really is this sort of very pessimistic viewpoint. But my stock in trade is saying, look, there's numbers out there, there's data out there, we can check these things. And when you do, you see really a much more optimistic picture of retirement security in America.
So I guess my question back to you is, so why the negative perspective? I mean, I guess we can't get into the eyes and the brains of other people, but why take the pessimistic view? Is it to incentivize even more participation? Is it to create more plans? Why do you think, again, not putting you on the spot, but why do you think?
Well, it's, individuals, you can't psychoanalyze them. I mean, there is a natural pessimism among a lot of Americans. I mean, if you did a survey, say, do we have a crisis in veterinary care? Probably half of Americans will tell you we do. They'll just respond that way. When I think of it, partly I think people don't have the incentive to, I hate to say, tell the truth about the U.S. retirement system. If you're in the news media, if you publish a story saying, Americans face retirement crisis, people are going to click on that story. That's fear
Yeah.
sells. If
Yep.
it leads, it leads. But if you say, look, Americans by and large are doing very well in retirement, savings are higher than ever, people are like, well, okay. If you're in the retirement industry, look, they've got a product to sell. And they believe in their product. I don't think they're being dishonest about it. At the same time, if you saw a pharmaceutical commercial that said, look, you may have this ailment, but guess what? We have the solution to it. You would
Hmm.
understand that the drug company is, in fact, in the business of selling you this thing. But if you see claims, oh, Americans face retirement crisis, you're not going to have enough from the people who want you to save more, it doesn't mean they're lying to you, but it means they're biased in a way. They believe in their product and they want you to do more of it. And then politically, to be honest, you have a lot of people whose political inclinations are such that they don't trust the idea of Americans largely saving for retirement on their own. In the sense, there's people who are much more comfortable with the retirement system that, the guarantees everything for people. If you think of, the retirement systems you have in continental Europe, there's much less private retirement savings, much more coming from the government. A lot of people in America, that's what they would want. So they just don't have much of a political incentive to point out the successes, where they're occurring. So when you take the news media industry and politics, and nobody has the incentive to really give you the true story about the retirement system, it's not surprising that much of what people hear is very negative.
So, I mean, do you think that I think the American consumer is pretty astute. I mean, they can sniff things out. They may not say it. They may not be demonstrative about it, Andrew. But do you think that the American consumers, like, they know whether, no matter their income, they know they need to save. They know that they're probably going to live to a whatever ripe old age is for their specific genetics and their predisposition. Do you think they are they good stewards of their own money outside of and saving? Do they get it?
I think by and large they do. Sometimes, you'll read stories that, there's an implicit assumption among a lot of people working in retirement that every person should be saving for retirement at every part of their life. So
Hmm.
even if you're a low income 20-year-old, you should be saving for retirement, and they'll play off the equity premium or, something like that. But the reality is, textbook economics points out there's two groups who probably shouldn't be saving for retirement. That's young people, because your sort of life cycle model says you shouldn't save when you're young and poor. Wait till your income rises, which is in fact what people do. But you also look at very low income people, let's say maybe the bottom fifth of the population. Those people, if you look at data, say from the Congressional Budget Office, those people will get Social Security benefits that replace roughly 85% of their pre-retirement earnings. So rationally, they probably shouldn't be saving, because these are very low income people. They're already get a high replacement rate from Social Security. They've got, bigger fish to fry, like putting food in the table. But if you put those two groups together, young people and low income people, you're probably looking at 40% of the population or so that really shouldn't be saving for retirement at any given time. And that kind of matches the data we see. So the interesting thing is you'll have so-called experts say everybody should be saving for retirement all the time. We're not doing it, and chiding these low-income people. But in the most part, people are doing what is rational. They're actually doing what economics predicts they'll do. But a lot of the people who are sort of criticizing them don't understand the economics of it. So it's an interesting kind of take.
Yeah.
Retirement is one thing I'll say is, if you do a survey and you ask Americans, do you think America faces a retirement crisis? You'll probably get 65% saying yes. I mean, there's been a lot of surveys on this, and people will say it. And partly is that they're just being, fed, if they read about this, they're being fed a line that their retirement system is failing. But there is something inherently scary about retirement planning, in the sense this is probably the biggest sort of financial exercise you're going to go through in your life. You have your whole career to do it. You have one chance to get it right. It depends on projecting all these sorts of things. What's going to happen to my earnings? What's going to happen to rates of return? What's my longevity going to be? It's complicated. So I understand people are afraid. But even if you have, 2/3 of Americans saying we face a retirement crisis, if you look in surveys of actual retirees, when they ask them, do you describe your financial situation as a retirement crisis? It's like under 5% say they do. So we fear a retirement crisis, but in reality, that crisis very, very rarely comes about. And that's good news.
Yeah, it is very good news. Andrew, I think we've dispelled a lot of the myths around the retirement crisis, but do you have concerns? Are there concerns, legitimate concerns about saving for retirement? You hit on some of them, I think, the longevity and all that kind of stuff. But do you have ways that we can shore up the system to make it even better? Because I mean, the retirement industry moves at a glacial pace. This thing has been evolving for 40 plus years. I mean, I think it came about in 1978 when I was 6. It's changed a lot, but how do we make it better?
Well, look, there's things we can do to fill in the gaps, like the retirement coverage gap, the percentage of people who don't have an access to a workplace retirement plan. That gap is much smaller than people think it is. Nevertheless, there's no reason that everyone shouldn't have access to a retirement plan on the job, because that's the easiest way to save for retirement. We can fill gaps like that. Mandating auto enrollment probably makes sense, although for low income people, low income employees, it may not make sense, in the sense they may lose more in means tested government benefits than they would gain from savings. But that's a policy issue we can look at. The real threat, or as I put it in my upcoming book called The Real Retirement Crisis, is almost all on the government side. And this is true in the United States, but it's also if you look at countries around the world where people measured what they call a retirement savings gap, the amount by which savings should be increased in order to assure that everybody has a secure retirement. Almost all of that retirement savings gap is on the government side. In the U.S., reputable studies say Americans' retirement savings are short by maybe $1 trillion or so out of over $50 trillion we've saved. But if you look at Social Security, you look at state and local government pensions, even you look at Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, there you are looking at funding shortfalls of, I don't know, $30 trillion. So, and it's true if you look in other countries as well, it's because of the incentives. Individuals do make errors, and behavioral economics says sometimes they're predictable errors, but the incentives are in the right direction. If I don't save enough today, I know I will not have enough income in the future. It's very different with a government program. I mean, if members of Congress say we're not going to fix Social Security today, it's not going to come back and bite that member of Congress tomorrow. It's going to bite some other future member of Congress. So we've literally known for 40 years we have to fix Social Security that has this long-term funding gap. Each and every year there's the incentive to kick the can down the road, and each and every year members of Congress and presidents have done precisely that. So it really is people responding to the incentives. And the incentives on the household end are to save for retirement. The incentives on the government end are to promise benefits without paying for them. And lo and behold, people follow the incentives.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Andrew, this is going to conclude part one of our conversation. We're going to bring you back tomorrow. And we're going to ask you to talk about the personal data that's held at the Social Security Administration. What's there? What kind of systems do they have? We're going to talk more about it tomorrow. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you back on the program tomorrow morning.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse, for all the news in one place. Details, of course, at our website. And your subscription helps support all this great BRN content. Until tomorrow, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.